I was just going to say that since the objective moral is obviously the Bible and the Bible's endorsement of slavery, then our refusal to enslave our neighbors is therefore immoral. And who are we to impose this judgment that is clearly not supported by the Bible?
And not only that, the very basal message of Christianity, there's some that you can actually forgive someone by torturing and killing your son. Does that make any sense to anyone? You know, I want to be there, and therefore I'm going to torture and kill my puppy.
No, it's never made any sense to me. As a dyslexic, I can't pronounce the name. Shall we call you Uchiwawa? Uchiwawa. Are you with us?
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How can we help you?
I was just going to say that from my perspective, this article actually makes a lot of sense. Because I haven't actually read the article because I don't even know where it is, but from what you guys are saying, it seems like whenever I think of what God's opinion would be, is what I would do is, I would think about what I would think is true, because, from my perspective, what is true is what God would believe, because God would believe what is true. And it wouldn't be that I would have direct contact with God or anything, but it would be that,
But my question to you would be, therefore, how do you go about determining what you think God would want?
Well, let's start with the really...
Well, one at a time, Thunder, please. One at a time.
Well, through, reason and other things like that. I wouldn't say that I would have direct contact with God.
Yeah, so it's through your own intuition.
Yeah, you could say that.
Right. I'm sorry, Thunder, please to go on.
So there is no brain-God interface?
There could be, but, if you were to ask me what does God believe on something, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't go ask God to directly put into my mind his beliefs,
I'm confused. You seem to be putting forward two arguments simultaneously. Either God is actually interacting with the neurons in your brain somehow, or he can't interact with the neurons in your brain. Which is it? God can do it, or God can't do it?
I would say he could, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's always going to do it. You know what I mean?
Has he ever? In your experience, has he ever?
I don't. That's kind of hard to say. It would be hard to prove whether or not he did or not. I could.
Well, here's another problem with that. Then, when you have people that do heinous atrocities, like murdering their own children because they said that God told them to, how can you tell when God tells you to do something? And that couple that went into the Russian language course, how did they determine that God was telling them to do that?
Well, does the study even deal with that? Do they tell these people to ask God, or are they just asking what their opinion is of what God would think? I haven't read the article, so I don't know.
Well, I think that would be a completely different kind of study. When people say that they are motivated by God to do something, I would predict that in an interview with a dozen or so or more such people, that when you get down to their discovery of what they need to do, it's going to be a decision that they made, and they'll be able to give you the reasons leading up to that decision, and then they will post-decide that it was God that wanted them to decide that. In very rare instances, it will be a voice in the head, and this is where I think a lot of religious beliefs may be curable with Thorazine.
That would be my point. When someone hears God's voice in their head, is God actually messing with their brain then?
Can I read just a very short section here? From the paper, one can quiz neighbors on their beliefs, read editorials about celebrities' positions, or observe public opinion polls. Religious agents do not lend themselves to public opinion polling. Even within Christianity, for example, groups differ quite dramatically in their interpretation of God's attitudes towards such topics as same-sex marriage, the death penalty, and abortion, the inherent ambiguity of God's belief on major issues, and the extent to which religious texts may be open to interpretation and subjective evaluation suggest not only strong egocentric biases when reasoning about God, but also that people may be consistently more egocentric when reasoning about God's beliefs than when reasoning about other people's beliefs. What do you think of that, Algie?
Well, I would say what I was saying before. I mean, I agree with that because, like, whenever I think about what God would say, I would look at, like, for example, I think most of the people that say that homosexuality is wrong, what they're looking at, they're not asking God directly. They're looking at certain verses in the Bible and then saying that based upon that, that is what God would believe. Or maybe they're doing it based upon their own personal opinion. I don't think that, or at least in my case, I don't go up to God and ask him, what do you think about homosexuality? And some booming voice comes down and tells me what he believes.
We accept the booming voice doesn't come down, but do you ask him... One second, Aaron, please, one at a time. Do you ask him questions such as that? Or do you rely on the contents of the Bible and assume that that's God's message?
Well, I would rely on that along with reason.
So you would also rely on the same book that tells you that slavery is acceptable?
Yeah.
And do you think that
homosexuality is a sin?
Do you think that slavery is acceptable?
Under certain circumstances, I think that it could be acceptable, but I mean, I don't think this is really relevant.
What circumstances can you envision that you think slavery is acceptable?
Well, okay, we're inside of a society thousands of years ago. We don't have a prison system. We take over a country. What do we do with the warriors? Do we kill them? Do we just let them go out and live inside another country? What do we do with them? So we could put them to work and then get them to have, help us out producing food, and then we could take care of them that way,
Right. So the accounts of slavery as in the Bible you think are justifiable and acceptable?
Yeah.
You understand that the Bible doesn't talk about the kind of condition that you're talking about. The Bible talks about taking people from the street and imprisoning them in slavery, travelers who sojourn among you. And then, the provisions under which you may keep their wives, their children, and such for their whole lives. You may release the father of a particular collective of slaves that you own, but you won't release the wife and you won't release the children. So, of course, the father's not going to go anywhere. That way you can feign that you have an ability for him to work out his indemnity to you, and yet you've still got him for a lifetime contract. This is not the conditions that you're talking about.
Well, actually, it does say inside the scriptures that that it condemns people to go out and capture people and brings them into slavery.
It does
I'm sorry, have you read the Bible?
It does say that you can take slaves from the travelers, from the foreigners who sojourn among you. Does it not?
I guess I would have to look at that verse. I don't know. But I mean,
it also gives specific provisions on how long you can keep your slaves, how much you can sell your slaves for, when people can be released under what conditions, and when they cannot be. It talks about how.
Well, Uji, just 1 second, Thunder. I'll come to you in a second, Thunder. Uji, can I just ask you seriously? I don't mean to embarrass you when I ask this question. It's a genuine question. Have you actually read the Bible?
Yes, I have.
All of it?
I believe so. I never started from the beginning to the end, but I've read
dipped into
books of the Bible. Well,
I don't see how you could be ignorant of what the Bible says about slavery if you've read it.
I'm not ignorant of it. I mean, I may have forgotten certain parts of it, but from what I read,
by forgetting, do you mean cherry picking?
All right, no. I want to hit him with another point. I'm sorry, and I know where DPR is going with this, but I want to ask one other thing of our believer. Don't you think it a bit curious that the message that God Himself reveals through direct divine revelation through all these different people is completely different depending on the listener. I mean, whereas one person says that, homosexuality is a sin punishable by death, and in fact, millions of people do, and we hear people, being killed in Arabic countries, for example, for this regularly, and it used to be this way in the Middle Ages. And then we have homosexual priests in other denominations. How can it be that when they are talking to the same God, that they're getting different answers according to the biases they already held? Is there a way that we can distinguish the delusions of man from divine revelation?
Okay, the way you would do that is you would have like miracles accompanying the people who proving what they say, and like if they mention prophecy or whatever, prophecy coming true and stuff like that.
Well, can I pause you there? Because what I think is interesting is that every single religion that I'm aware of has prophecies and miracles. And this is a question that I was actually going to come to. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot too much. I understand you're and it's a somewhat difficult position. I hope you don't feel outnumbered or that we're ganging up on you, but I'm genuinely curious to go back to one of the questions I asked before about how you determine what the truth is. How do I know that you have the truth and a Muslim doesn't? How do I know that you have the truth and a Hindu doesn't? And both of those religions include miracles, include prophecies. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, equally. How do I know that you've got it right? How do you, more importantly, how do you know that you've got it right? How do you test that?
Okay, I think that it's important to note here, back to the topic where we were, that I wouldn't go about through asking God what is the truth. What I would do here... You
said what you wouldn't do, but what would you do?
Right. What I would do here is I would go and look at the evidence and see what is most, most congruent with the evidence.
Right. And what evidence have you looked at to convince yourself that you've got it right and that other people haven't? And we're not talking about one or two other people. We're talking about a couple of billion Muslims, for example, and people of different denominations of Christianity, which I've made the assumption that you're a Christian. How do we know? How do you, as I say, what evidence are you looking at?
Okay, well, I mean, I would look at eyewitness testimony based of the miracles. I mean, we're kind of going off testimony, right?
What eyewitness testimony?
Like those inside of the Gospels. I mean,
so what, such as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
I'm aware that like two of them are eyewitness testimonies. I don't know. I wasn't really prepared for a debate on whether God exists or not. I was just giving my own personal opinion on.
Just out of interest, you do know there are synoptic and non-synoptic Gospels, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
So where does two of them as eyewitnesses? Three of them are synoptic, and one is John, yeah?
I'm sorry, what did you...
I mean, I'd say we don't want to appear to be ganging up on you. It may come across that way, but for me, it is a genuinely serious question as to what you've looked at that has convinced you that this theology is something by which you should lead your life. Because it sounds to me as if you haven't really looked that deeply into it. And I don't believe that there are any accounts that could be seriously put forward as eyewitness accounts. You do realize that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John weren't written by the people they were supposed to have been written. They were written at the minimum of 70 years after Jesus' death. Do you accept that?
Well, they were written, about 70 years. I mean, I haven't looked into it.
So there you go. Those cannot be eyewitness accounts, can they?
Well, no. I mean, from what I know, I know a couple of them were written by eyewitness accounts. I mean, look, I wasn't.
They weren't. You've just hang on a second. 1 second, Thunder. I'll come to you in a second. I'm sorry. They're not eyewitness accounts unless they were written by people who actually saw the events. That's the definition of an eyewitness account.
Right.
And these books weren't written until 70 years. No serious theologian says otherwise. These books were not written until 70 years minimum after Jesus' death. I mean, do you accept that?
That's actually not true because...
Okay.
When was the earliest gospel written?
Like I said, I'm not prepared for this kind of debate. I remember hearing from somebody that they were written, that eyewitness accounts. Okay, I don't have the evidence here.
Okay,
nor do I have evidence.
For you.
Nor do I have evidence of Gandhi here. I don't have any of this sort of evidence yet. I still believe it.
But I have maybe a pertinent question.
That's fine. I just want to clarify. The biblical scholars, all of them, unanimously conclude that the earliest gospel could not have been written until decades after Jesus' death. Just for clarification.
Okay. Thunder, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, there's that bit in Matthew where the tombs open up and all of the zombies come down into Jerusalem and talk with people, if I remember rightly. Do you believe that happened when Jesus died?
Sure. I'm not sure. I mean,
Andy,
it could have happened.
Don't you think that's the sort of thing that might have been noticed by the historians of the time as unusual?
Yeah, I guess so, but I mean...
So it's the sort of thing that you might expect to get some contemporary
gentlemen,
documentation.
As much fun as this might be, I would hate to think that we have Andy Thomson sitting here just listening to us prattle on the way we normally do. I'd like to hear him.
Honestly, I am enjoying hearing the three of you because I don't...
Oh, don't stoke me at my ego. I'll go.
No, seriously, because I live a relatively sheltered life and I don't have the opportunity to debate theists and it actually is interesting and enjoyable watching you guys take him on. I'm always at a loss as to how to argue with someone, as he just said, who's willing to speak about things when he hasn't read the paper and is willing to make a statement that he continues to believe even though he doesn't have any evidence.
Well, I mean,
let's bring this back to neuro chemistry with the brain-God interface, Alchie. When they say in the Bible that God comes to people in dreams, is God actually interfacing with their neurochemistry there? Is God messing with people's brains when they have dreams, when God comes to them in dreams in the Bible?
I don't think we know.
Well, I suspect that's the answer that we're going to get as well. But just going back to your point, Andy, I mean, this is what I find very interesting in the work that you're doing. Why is it that people believe things for which there is no evidence? And I don't want to embarrass Uchi Wawa too much, but it does appear that he is basing his beliefs on something that he's not looked at, and not looked at in detail. And this is what I find interesting, that somebody is prepared to live their life with a system or a belief system that they've been told about, and they've never really looked into it. And I'm sorry, I'm talking as if you're not here, wow, but do feel free to chip in whenever you like. But this is what I think is interesting, Andy, and what observations can you give, if any, as to why it is that people would buy into something without evidence?
Well, I think we have to remember that we're all vulnerable to that. And we have an automatic, reflexive, sort of fast part of our brain, and then the more rational, thoughtful, slow processing comes on later. And the default position for all of us is believe what you hear, question it later. So in some sense, we're all vulnerable to believe the unbelievable and then and let it pass off. But I think when it comes to something so important as religion and the way religion so impacts our world, I think we want to make particular efforts at understanding, why people persist in religious beliefs that are, obviously, I would argue, so destructive to the possibility of civil society.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is one of the things that I thought was interesting about after reading your book. And I know at some stage I mentioned this to you, but it left me with a degree of pessimism because you explained so well the adaptations and explanations for why people have this propensity to believe in religion. And it's so strong. It's like and it's so deep-rooted within us. It's inevitable. We're never, ever going to get rid of religion, isn't it? That was my view. This pessimistic view that, we're stuck with this.
Well, I don't think so, and let me tell you some of the reasons. First of all, we see a fall-off in religious belief in any number of countries, and particularly, say, the British Commonwealth countries, the Scandinavian countries. We see a fall-off in religious belief even before the cognitive neuroscience revolution that has occurred in the last 10 or 15 years. And I just think we can remain guardedly optimistic that as this material works its way into the general culture, into your basic psychology textbook, in other words, you can't come out of college without a Psychology 101 course in which a significant part of this information is going to be in it. So, I think we can learn to do without faith, because I think we'll understand it. So I actually remain somewhat optimistic.
Maybe I'm just a natural born pessimist.
Let me, if I could add two things. I want to go back to your previous question about why we're all vulnerable to belief, and suggest for the listeners and anybody interested 2 books. One that's a couple years old by Gary Marcus, and it's called Kluge, and it's about the sort of haphazard construction of the human brain. And he has very good discussions in there about our vulnerability to believe first and ask questions later, not just on religion but on everything. And it's a very nice book about how our brains are really kind of old technologies laid on with a little bit newer in terms of cognitive mechanisms. I think it's a great book. The other one is one that is getting a lot of attention right now. It just came out, Kahneman's book, Fast Thinking, Slow Thinking. And he lays all this out. And again, it's a wonderful book and very accessible, and talks about sort of the automatic, instant kind of acceptance we give to things, our cognitive biases, and how hard it is actually to be rational and pursue evidence and think through it. But I think you can learn to do those things.
As I say, I'll give you the last word before we move on to the next caller. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I don't think that my position is the same as having no evidence, because what I would say is, like, okay, what evidence do I have of Confucius? How many books have I read on him? And yet I still believe it. Am I not rationally justified to believe it? And yet I actually do know of people. I do know more about Jesus's record, even though I can't defend it critically here because I'm not prepared for that. For example, I could point to Jesus and the Eyewitnesses by Richard Buckingham, or I could point to Miracles, the Credibility of the New Testament's Account by Craig Keener. I don't think that it's the same thing as saying I have no evidence. I think it's saying that I just do not have the capability here of defending them.
I'm sorry if I put you on the spot in that way. I didn't intend to, but I think that, as I say, I think it's an interesting question if you're going to believe in something as important as a God. And
more than that, you've heard the phrase that positive claims require positive evidence. Okay, so maybe Confucius didn't really exist, but what reason do we have to believe that Confucius did not exist? Maybe he didn't, but there's no improbable claims there. With Jesus, there are many improbable claims, just like there are with Buddha and Krishna and Guru Nanak. Then you get into the second part of the statement, which is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And here you're talking about somebody that does all these miracles that you automatically dismiss from Krishna. He did many of the same things. He made the blind see. I mean, he was able to bend time. He claimed that he had created the universe. Guru Nanak had similar claims, as did Buddha. Divine births, all of them, Zoroaster too. But with Jesus, you've got this claim, and all you've got is the stories written decades later, at least, about a cult leader, at best, who may or may not have existed at all. That's the way I see it anyway.
It's exactly how I would have put it.
Yeah. Well, as I say, would you like to come back? I'd more than happy to let you and give you the last word.
I think that we can end this here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much indeed.